Hi, I'm Fred DeSico. I'm one of the partners at Pollock, Isaac, and DeSico. I run my firm's real estate transactional law department. I've been doing this for nearly 35 years, and I'd like to take this opportunity to share with you one question that I recently received from a client of mine. The client is recently employed and is now looking to purchase a first home. And the question was one of almost exasperation. I'd like to buy a home. What are my first steps? What should I do? Can you help me? Well, the answer is yes, I can help the client. But I'd like to share with all of you the answer to this question because I think it's important for anyone who's considering buying a home for the first time. I believe the first thing that anyone should do before making a major purchase is determine exactly what the price range will be in the homes that you are looking to potentially buy. I believe, unless you are in a different financial position, you should speak with a mortgage lender before you do anything to determine how much money you qualify, what the monthly costs of that financing will be, and achieve or obtain from the lender what's called a pre-approval letter. That letter is a simple letter on the bank or lending company's letterhead saying that you qualify for up to a certain amount of money for a price of a home up to a certain amount. When you get this pre-approval letter, it'll tell you what you're able to qualify for and what price range you should be looking at. But even more important than that, it is something you can present to a seller which shows that you have been pre-approved for a loan. Sellers want to know that the buyer that they do business with is able to actually go forward and close on the transaction. So this pre-approval letter not only helps you, but it also enables you to put your best foot forward in your dealings with your potential seller. The next issue is to determine whether you're going to use a broker to help you with the transaction. Some clients decide they want to look for homes that are being sold by individuals who are not using brokers. They may want to go online to Craigslist or look at the New York Times, and all of those options are fine, except it doesn't, in my humble opinion, open you up to the full array of homes that might be available to you. So I do recommend that you hire a broker, or at least work with a broker to take you around to see various homes within your price range which have the qualities that you're looking for in a home. In terms of finding the right broker, there are a number of ways to do that. If you have friends who have worked with a broker and are comfortable with that broker, a recommendation is always a good starting point. To me, I want a broker who knows the area you're looking for or you're looking to find a home in. A broker that has experience and is so aware of the town or towns that you're looking at that they can almost educate you immediately on the pluses and minuses of the various parts of these individual towns. Now, sometimes I have clients that don't even know where they want to live. They know they want to be in the metropolitan New York area. They know they want a reasonable commute to Manhattan, but they're open to suggestions. In that case, you may want to work with more than one broker in more than one area. Ultimately, you need to become the most educated person on every property that's out there in your price range. People ask me, what's the value of a home? What's a fair market value? And it sounds corny for me to say, but the answer is what someone would pay for it. And the market price is not linear. It moves up and down based on inventory and whether or not you have sellers that are anxious to sell or they can wait and hold out for a higher price. So You go and work with a real estate broker, and now you find a home and you're ready to make an offer. My belief is that's a good point in the process for you to retain a lawyer. A lawyer can help you with formulating what you present through your broker as your offer to buy the home. Most people think, well, I offer a price and maybe they accept it. But your offer is more than that. It's an opportunity for you to sell yourself. You're not going to find this in a book, but I'm going to tell you. Sellers will take into account whether they like the person who's buying their home. If you move into a home and you have an elderly couple who has raised their family and has lived there for 10, 20, 30, 40 years even, it helps for you to sell yourself to that seller. People want to feel good about the people who are going to move into their home. So, when you make an offer, you make sure your offer includes how much of a mortgage you're going for, how much money you're able to put down, what you both do for a living, whether you have children if you're buying a home, presenting you as a lovely person or persons with a family, whatever may present you in the most favorable light, that should be put out there. Also, making sure that there is an understanding of what you're offering, you should make sure your broker lists the things that you want included. If you're buying a co-op apartment in Manhattan and they have a fireplace mantle, even if it's not real and it's not attached to the apartment, you may want that. You may want that included in the sale. The general rule of what's included and not included is simple. If it's attached to the real estate, it's included, and if it's freestanding, the seller can take it. And trust me, if you don't list things that are freestanding, most sellers will take them. So even something basic such as a microwave oven, or maybe in a home there's a second refrigerator in the garage or the basement. You want to make your list as exhaustive as possible. You want to make sure that the seller knows what you're offering. Timing of your closing is important. Some sellers may have children and they don't want to sell during the school year. You may not want to sell or do your transaction during a busy time of work. So, coming to an agreement on when you can close. As a buyer's lawyer, I'd love for you to be able to say you're flexible. That way you're in a better position than someone who is not flexible. So you put the offer in and the offer gets accepted. The seller's attorney then prepares a proposed contract and the buyer's lawyer negotiates this contract. What's the contract? Some people say to me, what's the difference between a contract and a closing? Well, I'll answer it as simply as I can. The contract is the document whereby the buyer and seller shake hands on terms and write those terms down, and they agree to close, or they agree that the ownership transfer will happen at a later date. Why does it have to happen at a later date? It's not the same as buying a car where you could sometimes drive it right out of the showroom, or a suit where you can take it and bring it to your tailor. No, when you buy real estate, there are things that have to happen after you agree and before you can actually become the homeowner. So the contract lists everything that the parties have agreed on, and then there's a period of time that passes before you actually take title. That period generally is somewhere between 60 and 90 days. In some cases, it can take longer, depending on circumstances that we may discuss in this conversation or maybe in a later one. But during that period, you as a buyer have to get qualified and 100% approved by your bank. You have a pre-approval letter, hopefully. That's a start, but you're not even obligated to use that bank. You can use another lender, or you can go to that lender. It's your choice, but you're going to have to submit more paperwork than you could imagine. The bank, especially these days as opposed to even 20 years ago, requires much more information and documentation. They need to verify your employment. They need to verify what you have in the bank. They need to run credit checks. If it's a co-op or a condo, they need to investigate the co-op and condo and make sure that they have appropriate things in place that a lender wants, such as insurance, a budget, or there may be a need to review financials to make sure that the co-op meets with the bank's requirements. In a co-op or a condo situation, it would be helpful to speak to your loan person to see if the building you're buying in has been pre-approved. If the building is pre-approved by that lender, the purchase of an individual apartment is much more streamlined and easier than if the lender does not have that building on their approved list. Some of the major lenders, I'm thinking of JP Morgan Chase, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, they have a large market share of mortgage lending in New York. They often have a list of banks, or the loan office is able to access a list of banks that these lenders have loaned monies on in the last 2 to 6 months. Clearly, if they've recently closed on a loan for another apartment in that building, it makes it easier for your loan to be approved. With a home, the bank is not going to have any experience with your home. So the bank is going to hire an outside appraiser to tell the bank that this home is worth approximately what you're paying, so that the bank feels comfortable that the amount of money the bank is lending makes sense. And if, God forbid, they had to foreclose, there's a good chance the bank is going to get its money back. Although that's the bank's concern, that's not our concern, is it? So, once you get your bank approval, during that period, your lawyer is doing a title search and reviewing the title to make sure that at closing you get the property free and clear. In most cases, maybe 90 to 95% cases, I don't see title problems that can't be fixed. It's rare for me to tell a client, there's title problems, you can't buy this house. But it does happen. But there are title problems that could delay the closing. And in those circumstances, I sit down with my clients and explain those circumstances. The property might be tied up in an estate. There may be, in a previous deed, a mistake that was made, a typographical error. There could be an issue of a fence encroaching a property on a home. Or with an apartment, maybe a previous owner renovated a kitchen without getting the approvals. So there are things that could have to be cleaned up before you can close, and that will impact how long that period between contract and closing is. So let's say everything is working. You've got your loan approval, your attorney has a clean slate on the title, and the seller is ready to close. The seller needs to move into the next home, and now we go to the closing date. Well, a good attorney should make you aware of exactly how much money you need to bring to the closing and why. You shouldn't have surprises at your closing. I've had clients say to me, wow, at the last closing I did, I was writing checks, and I had no idea what I was writing checks for. You hear that all the time. I'm sorry, but I put the blame on the attorney in that situation, because the client should know exactly what the client is paying before that client walks into the room. And if something changes, it should be minor and unexpected. The bank forgot to mention a small fee, a messenger fee. Or you go visit the home and the refrigerator isn't working, and we now have to negotiate some payment to you because you're getting a refrigerator that isn't working. Those things cannot be anticipated, but those are relatively small. They involve relatively small dollar amounts. In terms of what you're paying for your purchase price and your closing costs, you should know before you walk into that room. I mentioned the word closing cost. 2 words that scare people. and two words that sometimes create issues. So you need to have an idea of your closing costs at the very beginning of the process from your attorney. That's why I suggest hiring the attorney at the time you make your first offer. What are closing costs? Well, closing costs are payments you make in order to buy a home which have nothing to do with the price. They include government taxes. Yes, they tax you even when you buy a house. They include fees to the county clerk to record your deed, to record your mortgage. They include fees that your bank charges for the privilege of borrowing money from that bank. And I ask my client to show me the list of fees that the bank has provided, and I let them know if they're reasonable. So if you're choosing between lenders, maybe the difference in closing costs could be a reason to choose one over another. Ultimately, the banks all have closing costs, and they have to be paid at closing. Also, there are payments between you and the seller that are not part of the price. The seller may have paid the real estate taxes on a house through the end of the current tax period. So if you close in November and the payments have been made through December, you need to reimburse the seller for that month. Or if it's a co-op and it's July 3rd when you're closing and the seller's paid the maintenance through July 31st, you're going to be reimbursing the seller 28 days of maintenance, and your building may ask you for August maintenance right at the closing table. So these closing costs are not an exact figure that your attorney can give you from the outset, but your attorney can give you an estimate and a range if you hire a real estate attorney who has done hundreds and hundreds of these transactions and is aware of what all the closing costs are. So, for example, you could be buying a condominium for a price of $450,000 and your closing costs could be $15,000. Or a $2 million apartment, the taxes are higher, your closing costs can be, $25,000. So it's important to know what your closing costs are. One last point, one of the benefits of co-ops is that your closing costs are lower than in a corresponding condominium. Now, maybe in another talk, we'll discuss the differences between co-ops and condos, because there are a lot of them, and there are pluses and minuses in both. But one of the pluses that I will mention briefly here is that closing costs in co-ops are less. As a general rule, your closing costs in a condominium unit within New York City will be a little higher than 3% of your price. So if the price is $100,000, you're paying $3,000 in closing costs. If the price is $300,000, you're paying $9,000 in closing costs. If the price is $900,000, you're paying $27,000 in closing costs. The number goes up. In a co-op, it doesn't work that way for reasons that we can discuss at another time. Your closing costs would really consist of your bank fees and whatever the particular co-op charges, and maybe those fees won't exceed $3,000, and they won't be a function of the price because you don't have a lot of the government taxes that apply to condominiums and houses applying to a co-op. So, you go to the closing, and you bring the checks that your attorney tells you to bring. The closing takes about an hour and a half. I tell my clients before they go to the closing, they should go back to the property one last time and give it a final inspection. Some clients say, well, I was there last week. And I say, no. I say, what happens if someone vandalized the apartment? Or if you're buying a house and the kid next door hit a home run right through your living room window? Or if something happened when the seller's moving out. If anybody's worked with a moving company, you know they don't treat things the way you would treat them as they move them. So a company moves a piece of furniture out and carves a big gash in the wood floors. You don't want to find out about that after you've closed and paid the money. You want to find that out, and then if you know about it, you can go to the closing and we can deal with it. So, once you go to the closing, expect it to take about an hour and a half to 2 hours. I understand that these transactions can be nerve-wracking, and it involves a lot. It involves one of the biggest decisions you make in your life. You're writing checks the size of which you'll never write again. And you're signing a mortgage loan that will have you obligated to pay a particular debt from anywhere from 15 years to 30 years. It can be challenging, and it can make you nervous. What I'll say to you is, you're not the first and you won't be the last person to buy a home. It's a good time. It's something that should make you feel good. And what I like to say is, I know you'll probably want to go right to your home and enjoy it and turn the key and go in. Have a bottle of wine or a bottle of champagne or, whatever it is that you like waiting for you, because after you go through the whole process, you need to celebrate. Anyway, I hope this has been helpful. I hope this gives you an idea of what you can expect. Again, I'm Fred DeSico. I'm a partner at Pollock, Isaac & DeSico. You can always email me with any questions at fad@ppid.com. And our office number, we have a full staff during business and working days, is 212-233-8100. Thanks, and I'm sure you'll be listening to other conversations in the future. So thank you and take care.